Hello everyone, it's TK Friday. Today we'll transform the camera raw image on the left to the image on the right with the TK8 plugin for Photoshop. Stay tuned, it's TK Friday. Hello and welcome to the Joy of Editing with Dave Kelly. It's TK Friday, my favorite day of the week. Today I have this image by James R. May. Thank you, James. This is shot at Cathedral Gorge State Park in Nevada. Now I'm going to have the raw file for you to go ahead and download on my Dropbox, as well as the linear profile for the Nikon D850 camera that this was shot on. When you follow along and do the edits yourself, it really helps to reinforce what you're learning. I highly recommend that you do that. If you'd like me to edit one of your images on an upcoming TK Friday episode, please email me at edenbridgephotography@gmail.com and we'll discuss how you can send the image to me and what I need. And I really like to be able to let our viewers edit with us too, so I need your permission to let me do that. The images you see on the screen right now are some of the images that other viewers have sent me, and be patient, everyone. I will eventually get to these. And if you don't yet have the TK8 plugin for Photoshop, I'll have a link where you can get it in the description below this video. And there's also training videos on Tony Kepper's website. And if you use my promo code DK15, you'll save 15% off anything you purchase. So that's a nice extra savings, and it helps me out. And when you do that, I appreciate it. And please, everyone, please leave comments and questions. I love hearing from you. Okay, enough of all this stuff. Let's get started. Don't forget to download the image and the linear profile for the image. This is where the image starts out at, and I end up with this image after adding the linear profile. I just want a nice basic starting point for my images. I never overdo it in Lightroom. I basically added the linear profile and clicked auto, and I think I gave it a little extra vibrance and maybe pulled the highlights back a little bit. But that's about it. And the other thing I did was in HSL, I just pulled back the blues a little bit to balance this out to like a -14. And the other thing I always do is lens corrections, remove chromatic aberrations, enable the profile corrections. And then under detail, this image is ISO 64. So I just used the basic sharpening amount 40, radius and detail here. And noise reduction, I didn't use any noise reduction because this is such a low ISO image. It really doesn't need it, in my opinion anyway. And then I just right-clicked on it and clicked edit in Photoshop. But I almost forgot to tell you, I did do a crop on this. This is like a 16:9 crop. Okay, so you can crop it if you want or not. It's totally up to you. But I think for this image, I think this crop kind of suits it well. And next up, I'll see you in Photoshop. And here we are in Photoshop. Now, I did a little bit of cleanup. There's these trees up here. I just didn't like them. You know, if you can take them out if you want to, or leave them. It's up to you. I have this blank pixel layer called Cleanup, and I'll turn it on. You can see I removed those. I'll remove this one and show you how I did it. I'm just going to zoom in, and I just used the spot healing tool. Made sure I had my sample all layers checked on. And then I just went here and just gave it a little one of these deals. And I find this spot healing tool works really well. And sometimes I'll go over it again twice. But you could clean it up with that spot healing tool if you want to. I just think it's a nice little touch. I just want it to be clean. I know it's not 100% realistic, but in my world, I like it. I'm just going to go ahead and right-click on this layer and click on Merge Down to merge this into the background. Next up, I'm working with that new starting point as I showed you on my last tutorial, where I come up into Luminosity Mask and go to Midtones 3. I'll put that to a color grading tool, and this is where I set up the balance and the contrast for the initial start of my editing. To me, it's a very good starting point, and it helps you to wrap your head around what's going on in the image. One thing I want to say as well is when I show you the roadmaps, which I'll show you here in a second, I don't start out with a roadmap myself. I basically feel like I am like Lewis and Clark on an expedition. I don't know where I'm going. I just start. And as I find little issues in the image, I start repairing them. And then I start writing down what I've done And that's kind of like my map to get back, if that makes sense. So I don't really start out with a road map. I actually start out, just exploring the image, if that makes sense. But the road map helps to let you know where we're going. So the first step's going to be balance and contrast with the color grading tool. I haven't adjusted it yet, but we'll get there. And then secondly, I want to darken this area here. I feel it's a little bit too light. I want to add a little bit more balance here. It should be light, but I just want to darken it up. And then after that, I want to work on the shadows. Now, I'm just looking for problems as I go, and I'm thinking I'd like to see a lot of these shadows a little darker. I think it will really help the image. And then after that, I want to darken this area right here on these rocks. I guess these are called Badlands or whatever. I don't know. I've never been to Nevada or the Cathedral Gorge State Park, so forgive me for that. Anyway, I want to bring these down a little bit, and then I want to, I'm going to go back and hit it one more time, but I'll concentrate on these darker tones in here, and I'm going to use a zone mask to do that. And actually, I use a zone mask on the previous layer that I'll add, the one I just said, and that would be step 5. And then after that, we will dodge and burn through selections the entire image. And then one thing I'm really excited about, painting contrast. Now, I just experimented on this image with painting with contrast. I started out on these rocks or badlands, whatever you want to call them back here. And I was blown away by the way it really helped them. So don't miss that step. And also on these, on this brush up here in the foreground, it really helped it out. So I was really happy. As you can see, I got a happy face on. And then we'll finish up with a vignette, of course, right? Because every image pretty much needs a vignette, and we'll use the blend diff technique to protect the darkest tones. Now we can go ahead and start working on the first adjustment, the contrast and balance adjustment, through a color grading tool with a mid-3 mask on it. Before I make this adjustment, I want to clear something up here. I opened up my properties panel so you can see what this color grading tool is doing, because I don't want you to be confused. So if you understand what's happening here, everything will make sense to you. It's important to note that the color grading tool is tied to the curves adjustment layer. But notice one thing interesting on this properties panel. You notice we have a midpoint here locked. So if I were to click on this white block and drag it to the right, watch that white point up there start to move into the left. Do you see that? But notice an observation here. Also, the midpoint stays locked, but these mid-tones start to darken up slightly right here, and that's due to the fact that we have this midpoint locked. Now let me go ahead and right-click that and reset that. So if you're wondering, if I'm lightening up my highlights, why are my mid-tones getting darker? Well, that's why. And that's really not a problem, because the last adjustment will be a mid-tone adjustment, okay? And that'll take care of any problems there that you may be observing, okay? But let's go ahead and click on the black shadows block here. If I start to drag this into the left, now this black point moves into the right, and the opposite effect is happening. Now my mid highlights are starting to lighten up a little bit, okay? So that's quite interesting, right? And now let's go ahead and right click on the black block and reset it. But notice something here. I'm going to throw a regular curves adjustment above this because I want to show you something. Watch this line right here, this linear line. No curves have taken place yet. It's still a straight line. But I'm going to drag this white point in. Now, there's no locked midtone point, right? So if I drag this in, you notice that line stays straight. But on the color grading tool, due to the fact that we have that midpoint locked, it slightly curves this down. So that's actually what's happening there. I just wanted to show that to you just so you could understand it. And the same thing, if I move the black point in to make everything darker in the image, this line stays straight because it doesn't have a mid-tone point lock. So let me go ahead and get rid of this. I hope that didn't confuse you, and I hope it helps you to understand what's happening with this color grading tool. And now for the adjustment. So I'm going to start with the highlights. So I'm going to click on the white block for highlights, and I'm just looking at my lightest lights here. I'm going to start to drag this to the right. I think right around here. Now you notice I get a little contrast, and that is because, again, this curve is slightly dipping down. Not a big deal, because I'm going to come back at the end with midtones, and it'll solve any issues there. And now I'm going to go to my shadows, and I want to darken up my shadows. This is building up some contrast. And maybe somewhere right about there looks good. And now I want to work in the midtones. So let's click on the midtone block. And, I can either lighten my midtones, but I think I don't want to. I think I want to darken the midtones a little bit. So I'm going to drag this to the left. And you can see that curve is starting to pull down right when I do that. Pretty cool. I love this color grading tool. I use it, as you know, I use it just about for everything when I'm working with the TK8 plugin for Photoshop. But I think that's a good starting point. But do this to taste. Let me close the property panel. Here is the before and here's the after. Now this is all non-destructive, so we can come back and retweak any of this stuff if we want to. And don't forget, I can color grade shadows, midtones, or highlights. In fact, let me just show you something here. Let's open up the properties panel one more time. We have with a curves adjustment, we have red, green, and blue channels that we're working with, and that's how we alter color. But check how cool this color grading tool is. I'm going to click on midtones, and I'm going to take this block here and start to move it around. But watch these colors start to change. Can you see that? It's affecting red, green, and blue. Now, if I come down into blues, you can see the observation. But look, these are really technical and really hard adjustments to make, if you're just working on these red, green, and blue channels one at a time. But check that out. Isn't that cool? How we can just simply color grade this without really getting involved in a crazy curves adjustment. It's very user-friendly, I might add. In fact, I might just warm up those midtones slightly. I think that really looks cool. I'm going to do that. Here's our before and here's our after. Now I'll close the properties panel and now we'll move on. My next step is to darken down this light area in here. Okay, it's a little too light. So to do that, let's click on plus. This is important, and I mess this up all the time. I forget to do this. You have to click plus to open up a new color grading tool, okay? And then what I want to do is I just want to darken this down a little bit. So what I'm going to do is click on midtones, and I think I can just darken. Now I'm just looking at this area. I just want to darken it down not too much, but maybe right there. Here's the before and here's the after, but I just want to target this area here. Now what I'll do is shut off this layer by clicking on this eye. And then I'm going to come up and X out the color grading tool, and let's open up our luminosity masks. And I'm going to use lights 1 because this is a light area here, but I'm going to tweak it a little bit. I'm going to come to the levels, and this is where you can fine tune your mask. And what I want to do is bring the shadow slider in to darken up the shadow tones, and then lighten up the lighter tones in here, maybe right about here, and then take the highlights to move this in to make that a little bit lighter. I want to maintain texture. Don't worry about the rest. I'm just looking at this area right here. I may lighten this up just a little bit more, something like that. We can close the properties panel, and now I want to output this to a black mask with a selection that I'll be painting through, and it'll set me up with a white brush. So just click right here, and you'll notice there's a black mask. I have a selection. You can see my selection indicator. Now all I have to do is paint my adjustment. Pretty cool. Now I think I can get away with 100% opacity here. So I have 100% opacity, a pretty large brush with a nice feathered edge on it. And I'll just paint across here the areas I want to darken up. And remember, I have a luminosity mask controlling everything. So I'm just painting through all these areas. And let's take a look, and I think that's it. Let's take a look. Here's the before, and here's the after. Darkens it up nicely. And we can take a look at the mask right here if we click on these double arrows. So there's the actual mask itself. I got a little bit on these rocks, but that's fine. It's not hurting anything. But again, here's the before and here's the after. If you're too strong, just take the opacity, and you can drag it back if you felt you have too much strength on there. But I think I'm pretty good. I might just take it back to about a 90. Here's the before and here's the after. Now on to the next step of my Lewis and Clark expedition. The next step is to darken some of the shadows on this foreground area here. And to do that, I'm going to use another color grading tool. Now this is important. You notice we have a selection here. If I were to click on the color grading tool and click this plus, the selection would be added as a mask to the color grading tool, and I don't want that. So we need to deselect the selection by clicking here. And now we can click the plus here, and now we just have a white mask. Now I just want to work with the shadow tones, so I'm just going to click on the black shadow block and darken up the shadow tones. And we could be a bit aggressive here with our adjustment because we'll be painting this adjustment on through a selection, and that gives us a lot of control. I'll go ahead and shut this layer off, and now let's X out of the color grading tool. Let's grab a zone mask this time. And what I want to do is look for some of these darker areas in here that I want to darken up, like maybe right around in here. Click OK, and it picks that zone out. Now it's between a 1 and a 2, a little more closer to 2. I might just drag that in a little bit to right there, and I think that looks good. I'm going to narrow that in by dragging the slider to the left a decent amount, somewhere around here, and then I'll go ahead and lighten that up just a little wee bit. So it's only targeting these lighter areas, and I'm going to output that to a black layer mask, and I'll be painting with white paint through a selection. I'll start out at 100% opacity and paint this area because these shadows are not as strong in this right side right here. I'm staying away from the heavy shadows, but right into here, because these shadows, again, are not as strong, and I'm going to hit these a few times in here and down in here, maybe here. And again, I'm painting these on, so I'm in control of this show right here. It's really cool. So let's take a look. Here is the before, and here's the after. Now I'm going to go to the left side. I'm going to take my brush down to about 30% and start painting over here. Just going over these areas here, because those shadows are stronger, even in here. And maybe hit it one more time here. Now, each time I paint, even though I'm using 50%, it's not putting another 50% down. I'm not sure what the actual math is, but I'm sure there are those out there who could answer that in the comment section. Here is our before and here's our after. But see that? We're just building slowly. We're slowly developing and building up this image. You know, what's it going to look like when it's done? When I originally did this, I didn't know, but I was really happy with my final results. But we're going to get there. And remember, this is a journey. And the next thing I'm going to do is darken down these rocks right here, or Badlands. Forgive me if I'm saying that wrong. But to do that, I think it would help if I select the foreground area. And to do that, what I want to do is, let's go ahead and click on this icon here on the CX or combo panel to select the sky. And when I do, it's going to say, this will discard your current selection. Do you want to continue? Yes. So I click OK. And now it will select out the sky. And as you can see, it did it there. But I don't want the sky. I want the foreground. So just click on this invert button right here. And it selects that out. And now let's go ahead and save it, because I think we may come back and need this again. So let's click right here and we can save this. And let's just call it foreground. Okay, just like that. And click OK. It'll save it to a channel right down here, foreground. Okay, let's go ahead and deselect that selection for now, because there's something I need to do first, and that is to grab another color grading tool. So let's come up here and click on this icon. Now that doesn't add the color grading tool. Don't be fooled, because I'm fooled a lot by this. You got to click the plus to actually add it. Okay, very good. And make sure you don't have a selection activated. That's why I deselected before I went here, okay? Because it'll put the previous selection into that mask, and you don't want that. So I'm going to use the midtones, and I'm looking at these rock formations, Badlands, whatever. Forgive me. I know I'm probably saying that wrong. And then just start to drag this slider to the left. And I'm keeping my eyes focused on this area, because that's the area that I want to adjust. Now, you could be aggressive on this adjustment, because we're going to be painting this in. And now I'm going to go ahead and shut this layer off by clicking this eye. And now let's X out of here. And remember, we saved that foreground adjustment in our channel. So let's come over to My Channels and let's click on Foreground. And now we're going to do a mask calculation. I know it missed a few areas up here, but that's fine. It's not hurting anything. Go ahead and click on the mask calculator, and we're going to intersect. So just click on the X and X out of this, and let's go and find the zone we want. So let's click on the icon right here to open up zone mask. And I want one of these tones in here. I don't want the super light tones, but this tone right here is what I want. I'm going to click OK, and it picks those tones out. Now I can narrow that selection in just a little bit if I want, not too much. Maybe lighten it up a bit, something like that. And now let's click equals. And now you'll notice, you know, I've protected myself, because I know I'm going to probably overpaint into that sky a little bit, and that's just going to give me some protection. That's the only reason I did that. And now let's output that to a black layer mask. We'll be painting through that selection of the zone we picked with a white brush. I have an opacity of 50%. I'm mainly interested in this area here, but I want to darken this up here too. So I'm just going to paint across here and keep painting through here and come up into here. And remember, my you know, that sky selection or the foreground selection is protecting me because I intersected it with this area here. So there. So I'm going to do another pass on this lighter area at the bottom. And maybe another one here. Now, these really light areas are protected with that zone mask. Pretty cool and clever, right? And let me hit this one more time right in there. Now, let's take a look. Here is the before, and here is the after. The before and the after. We could take a look at our mask by clicking this double arrow icon here. And as you can see, I missed that little area in there. But you know what? It's not a big deal. I'm going to put this at 10 and just paint over there a couple times just to blend that in. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's go back. Here is the before, and here is the after. I have some nice contrast on these light lines in here. And now I want to get this darker area here and darken that up. I'm going to pick a zone for that next. Before I do that, let's see where we started at and how far we've come on this journey. I'm going to click my before after button. Here's how we started. And here's where we're at now. So we're moving along in the journey, but let's keep going. I really enjoy working with the TK8 plugin. I'm going to click on the color grading tool, the last layer I just did, and I'm going to add another color grading tool. So remember, I have a selection here. I got to get rid of it. So click on the icon right here. That'll deselect it. Let's grab a color grading tool, and don't forget to click the plus. I'm getting better at this. I'll be working with a midtone adjustment because this area right here will work well with that midtones adjustment. And for most adjustments, it really works fine. So let's go ahead and make that adjustment. So it's selected, and now I'm going to start to drag this to the left and just look at these areas up in here. Again, we can be over aggressive because we're going to paint it in. And I think right there should be good. So let's shut this layer off, X out of the color grading tool. And now let's go back to my channels, get the foreground, and let's go to the mask calculator. We want to intersect it, X out of here, and let's grab another zone mask. Only I'm going to go with these tones here, these darker tones this time. Click OK. And there's our selection right there. And I'm going to tighten it up a little bit here because see these light or these dark areas, that's going to protect the highlights. So I'm going to bring this in a little bit more and maybe lighten up that selection right about there. And let's click equals. And now we've intersected that with the foreground, the zone mask, which is really cool. Let's click on this icon, which will give us a black mask hiding our adjustment. We'll be painting through a selection, and the TK8 panel sets us up with a white brush to paint on the black mask. Let me go to 50% and paint over this area. Yeah, and that's pretty good. And only this area right in here. I'm going to get all of this. So there's one pass of 50%. Let me paint it again. I'm going to paint it again everywhere. I might hit this a couple times over here and here and just paint this. Staying away from up here, actually. So I just want to darken this down a little bit. Let's take a look. Here is the before and here is the after. Now, if I'm too strong, I can always pull back on this opacity. I'm going to leave it at 100%. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller and just paint up here. I just want to make sure everything blends well right up here. I want everything pretty even there. I like that. I think that's good. But notice how these light areas in here are protected, which is really cool. Okay, so here's the before and here is the after. Now, again, if I'm too strong, I can take this opacity and ease it off a little bit. And I might do that. We can always come back. It's all non-destructive. Here's the before and here's the after. So I am liking it. What's next? I'm glad you asked. How about some dodging and burning? I think I'll start out with dodging. Let's come up to the luminosity mask icon and click it. We need to find, we're going to do this through a selection. That's lights 1. Let's see what lights 2 looks like. And how about lights 3? Okay, lights 3. I think lights 2 will be better because I'm seeing more. All the light areas are the really light areas, but I think I'm going to adjust it a little bit, tweak it. I like to use this levels adjustment, so click here. And what I want to do is bring the shadows in a little bit to tighten up on the shadows, and I want to lighten up on the highlights. I want to maintain texture. I'm going to pull this midtones over a little bit, pull the highlights in a little bit more, and pull the shadows to the left. But because I want to accent these lines up here in the Badlands and in different areas down here in the foreground. Lighten them up, dodging, and I think that's good. And now let's just click on I like to use the left side of this dodge icon. It gives me a gray layer, 50% gray layer. I'm painting through a selection with white paint. The TK panel sets me up with white paint, and it's an overlay blend mode. And now it's just a matter of dodging. I have a nice small brush, and I'm going to start out at 50%, and I'm just looking for areas I want to highlight. I'll start this out, and then I'm going to stop the video and finish it off because it'll take too long. But you can see I'm just looking for light areas like on the Badlands here. And again, I hope I'm saying that right. You'll be so mad at me if I'm not. Oh well. So I'm looking for areas, and I'll be getting all these guys over in here. As you can see, I'll just paint here a couple times across there. Remember, the selection's saving me from overdoing it, and I'm going to hit some of these highlights down in here. So you see what I'm doing. When I come back to you, it'll be done, and I'll show you a before and after. And through the magic of video editing, I am back. Here is the before, and here is the after. It's subtle, but these little differences make a big impact in the final result. Let me go ahead and turn this up the full way to 100% so you can really see it, the before and the after. But I think I'll pull it back again. I'm going to take it to about like 86%, and now we'll do some burning. Let's come back to the TK8 multi-mask panel, click on the luminosity icon, and let's find a darks mask to use. There's a darks 1. Here's darks 2. I think I'm going to go with the darks 2. And I'm just going to output this to a burn tool, which is, I'm going to click on the left side here. It's going to give me a 50% gray layer in the soft light blend mode, a black brush. I'm going to start out with 30%. And all I'm going to do is look for areas that are dark. I'm going to think more artistic here. I am painting through a selection, so it's going to help me. I'm just showing you how I get started here. And then I'm going to shut the video off, just like I did before, and finish it off, because you don't want to watch me do this whole thing. It'll take up too much time. You have better things to do. So I'll just get you started here, and I'll come back, and I'll be painting up on these rocks as well, adding depth and dimension. It's really cool. It'll look a lot different when it's done. Okay, so I'll be right back with you. And I'm back. Now, this is before burning, and this is after burning. Now, that's at 100% opacity. Again, before and the after. But I think the burning here really adds a lot of depth and dimension. If it's too strong, again, you can take this opacity. I like to take it the whole way off and then just drag it up slowly and stop at a point where I think it looks really natural. And there's the 85%. Here's the before and here's the after. Isn't that cool though? But take your time. This is a lot of fun, and it is well worth it. We're almost done. I hope you're hanging in here with me. We're going to paint contrast next. What we're going to do is come to the TK Actions and find Paint Contrast, which is right here. I'm going to click it. And what we need to do is pick a color. So I'm going to pick a color. Like, I'm going to start here on these Badlands. I'm going to pick this color and click OK. I have that color picked. I'm going to get a nice big brush. I'll start out at an opacity of 30%. Now let's come up to my channels. We need some protection. Click on Foreground. I told you I'd use this again. Click on this icon. That'll load that as a selection. That'll just protect us when we get near the edge of these rock formations or Badlands or whatever they're called. So again, I'm going to start painting. I'm going to start down here and paint contrast, but look at it. It adds contrast, but it adds a pop of color as well, which is what I really, really enjoy. Let's come over into here too. And let's get this. And now I'll make my brush a little smaller, and I'm going to come up into these areas up in here. But look how that is adding that nice color. When I started doing this the other day, when I started working on this image, I thought, this is it. This is what's really making this image start to sing. And I'm just painting through here, but take your time. And I'll make my brush a little smaller up in here and just get this separately. You're the artist here, but just take your time and get it right. Okay, so check it out. Here is the before and here's the after. But isn't that nice? And if it's too strong, you got your opacity, you can pull it back. I'm going to go ahead and leave it up because I think it looks good. Next, we're going to work with painting contrast on these areas up in here. Let's go back to our TK Actions and grab another paint contrast. And this time I'm going to pick this color. Now, you may be saying, Dave, couldn't you have done that all in one layer? Well, yeah, but what if I want to adjust the opacity different on these rocks than I do on here. So that's why I'm doing 2 here. But let's just start painting in here. Let's try that 30% at first. Yeah, but look at that. Isn't that cool? I can make my brush a little bigger and just really paint over this whole area in here. Check that out. Oh, I like it. Let's paint in here. Okay. And again, I'm going kind of fast here, but take your time. It doesn't have to be a race. Or it could be. It's up to you. But I like to enjoy the journey. It is a journey. But check that out. Just that little bit of pop of color out on here as well. You don't have to hit everything, but whatever you want. Here is the before, and here is the after. And again, if it's too strong, let's pull back on our opacity. Like that. And let's just build it up slowly. I may not be as aggressive here. Here's 62%. Here is the before, and here is the after. Now, if you need more, of course, you can pull this opacity up. But let's go back to the rock formation. You could come here to fill and pull this to the right and make that even stronger. You see that? But 15% is a great starting point, and that's where the action starts you at. But I think I'm going to leave it right there. Again, the before and the after. And then on the foreground, the before and the after. But let's take a look at the overall before and after. Here's our before. Wow. And here's our after. Pretty crazy, right? This area right in here still feels a little light to me. I'm going to show you a new technique I'm working on. Here's what I want you to do. Get a lasso tool, type L, and draw a selection around the area that you want to darken. Like right around here. I'm missing that shadow. Just like that. And what I'm going to do is click on this feather icon. That'll let you feather your selection. I think 50 pixels is good. Click OK. And then come up to My Channels and load that as an active selection by clicking this. Let's intersect that by clicking on the mask calculator. Click the X to intersect X out of here. Let's intersect it with a luminosity mask. So click on that icon and click luminosity mask 3, just like we started the image, and click equals. And that selects that area, right? And now let's output that to a color grading tool. And let's just tone that down. So let's click on midtones, and I just want to darken that area down. But that nice feathering is going to protect it. I don't want to go too much, but like that. And I can even click on the shadows and pull the shadows in, or darken the shadows a little bit. And let's go to the highlights, and we can lighten the highlights or whatever. Just add a little bit of contrast. Here's the before, and here's the after. But just a slight darkening. And if it's too much, take the opacity and just pull it back. Just add as much as you need. I'm going to go around 77%. Here's the before and here's the after. But isn't that nice? It just tones that down. It feels to me like the midtones need to lighten up slightly, and I'm going to show you a trick for doing that. Let's X out of the color grading tool. Come up to luminosity mask. Click this icon. This is simple. Click midtones 1. We're going to output this to just a plain curves layer. We're not going to use the curve, but we're going to change its blend mode. So we can shut the properties down. Let's change the blend mode from normal to screen. Now that's too light, so I'm going to take the opacity the whole way off, and I'm just going to lighten up my midtones through that mids 1 mask. And I think I'm going to come up to around like 33. Here's the before and here's the after. It's subtle, but it's a desert, and it lost a little bit of lightness in the midtones, and that helps it. The last thing I want to do is put a vignette on this, so let's go ahead and click the TK actions. Let's just click vignette, and I'm going to accept the Gaussian blur amount. I'm going to click OK, and then we're going to double click on the layer, and we're going to use the blend diff just to protect our shadows. So I'm going to take this shadow slider and drag it to the right a little bit, hold my Option or Alt key down, and drag this out to feather. Now you can see the preview here. Here's the before and here's the after. Okay, we could click OK. And so again, here's the before and here is the after. So we're just protecting our shadows a little bit on the edges. But if that's too much, which I think it is, let's pull this back. Let's take it the whole way off and just build it up slowly. I don't want it to look like we really have a vignette on there, but here is the before and here's the after. Just a nice subtle vignette. The moment we've all been waiting for. Here is the overall before. Wow. And here is the overall after. I hope it's a wow for you. It is for me. Well, there it is, everyone, and thank you, James, for the use of this image from the Cathedral Gorge State Park in Nevada. It's much appreciated. I hope you give this one a try. If you enjoyed the tutorial today, please give it a like and share it with your friends. And if you're not yet a subscriber to my channel, please subscribe, click that bell notification icon. Then every time I upload a new tutorial, you'll be notified about it. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me today in the Joy of Editing with Dave Kelly. I'll see you all right here next time, but until then, happy editing.